Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fun with Flags and History. I'm your host Frank, and today we will be discussing the breakup of Yugoslavia and what led up to it. Let's not waste any more time and jump right into it, shall we? Yugoslavia, for a time, was seen as the Switzerland of the Eastern Bloc, when it was under the rule of the League of Communists of Yugoslavia. A lot had to do with the fact that Yugoslavia maintained its neutrality between the Soviet Union and the United States, as it was a leader of the non-aligned movement. But also, it had to do with Yugoslavia's economic status prior to 1980. Yugoslavia, with its unique form of communism known as Titoism, allowed Yugoslavia to have more economic growth than its Warsaw Pact neighbors. From 1960 to 1980, annual gross domestic product, or GDP, growth average was 6.1%, medical care was free, literacy was 91%, and life expectancy was 72 years old, according to the World Bank. Yugoslavia at one point was even a tourist destination for some, as seen in this tourist ad for Yugoslavia.
Yugoslavia!
Yugoslavia!
Yugoslavia! Yugoslavia!
Few Americans know little, if anything, about Yugoslavia. One reason is because not many people know where to find it. Actually, it's really quite simple. Just go to Italy and make a right.
Yugoslavia?
A popular misconception about Yugoslavia is that it is a neighboring country of the Soviet Union. In actuality, it borders 7 European countries, none of them being Russia. A bigger misconception than the location, though, is the country itself. When most Americans think of Yugoslavia, this is not what comes to mind. Or this.
However, while it may have seemed nice and peachy on the outside, the issue that would have later spilled over into the Yugoslav Wars started with the collapse of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. So let's discuss the three main issues for why Yugoslavia collapsed 30 years ago today. For the longest time, Josip Broz was the unifying figure of socialist Yugoslavia, and it makes sense when you think about it. At a time when Yugoslavia broke up into various client states by the Axis powers such as the Government of Salvation in what is today Serbia, and the independent state of Croatia, a country led by the German-Italian-backed Ustasha, a group that horrified even the ranks of the German Schutzstaffel, Marshal Josip Broz of the Yugoslavian partisans helped fight off the various elements of the Axis powers in his country, and reunified the country under a socialist banner. Winning the war against fascism also granted him the title of Marshal of the Yugoslav People's Army, when he earned the title at the second session of the Anti-Fascist Council for the National Liberation of Yugoslavia in the Bosnian town of Jajce on November 29, 1943. Socialist Yugoslavia under Tito's rule also had a unique government and economy setup that allowed itself to be open to both the West and the Warsaw Pact countries. This form of government was known as Titoism and was practiced by the League of Communists of Yugoslavia. This peaceful form of governing, except towards ethnic nationalists who wanted their country separated from the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, allowed the country to maintain its status quo for quite some time. However, when Marshal Tito died from gangrene at the age of 88, things began to fall apart rapidly. For starters, it was written in the Yugoslav constitution that the line of succession would carry out that a council of presidents would head the Yugoslav state, with one head from each socialist republic representing the council, and a president of Yugoslavia would head the council of presidents. A modern form of this government is very similar to the Swiss council government that exists today. Anyway, this government didn't work as well as the previous government under Tito for one reason. The 13 presidents that succeeded each other weren't unifying figures like Tito. Josip Broz's government was able to keep things together despite internal strife from time to time and some economical issues that were well hidden. Tito was also able to maintain dissent by allowing for a looser travel policy compared to its Eastern Bloc neighbors and exporting their criminals abroad. What does that mean? Well, it meant this. Let's say you were a bank robber or some kind of big-time criminal.
I need a medic bag!
Maybe even a hitman for the Serbian mafia. Rather than keep you locked up, the Yugoslav government saw you as a valuable asset and would set you loose in Western Europe on the condition that you didn't commit any crime in Yugoslavia. So in other words, they were political hitmen in some way. One such example was small-time thief and eventual war criminal Arkin, spending some time in France as a burglar. This, unsurprisingly, worked quite well. But once Tito died, the issues that Tito was able to keep together in his government did not work for this coalition of presidents. This allowed for the long-hidden issues of Yugoslavia to open up like a paper cut being opened up for air. Issues like ultranationalism and the Yugoslav economy being in the toilet gave way for politicians like Slobodan Milosevic to take power. Speaking of the economy, it's no secret that for the longest time, Yugoslavia was doing well for itself economically compared to the Warsaw Pact. Yugoslavia was 22nd in the world in its GDP in 1950, and for perspective, the German Democratic Republic only reached 17th in the world in 1989 near its dissolution. What Yugoslavia didn't want anyone to know, however, was that the country was heavily reliant on loans, kind of like one other Balkan country. However, these loans took on their toll in 1980, when Yugoslavia's debt soared from $4.7 billion in 1973 to $18.9 billion. This inflation only continued to get worse through the decade, with it reaching its peak in 1987 at around 167% inflation. In other words, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was undergoing its Venezuela moment before Venezuela had a Venezuela moment. The inflation and debt crippled the economy of Yugoslavia and angered the populace even more than normal. When the first democratic elections were allowed in 1989, many communist and former communist politicians in their respective parliaments were beaten by nationalist politicians, which we will now delve into. Guessing by the title of this section of the video, you wouldn't think this is connected at all to the video, but surprisingly, it is. On May 1st, 1985, Đorđe Martinović, a Serbian Kosovar farmer, went into a hospital near Giljan, mentioning a broken bottle was shoved up his rectum. He claimed that he had been attacked by two Albanian-speaking men while he was working in his field. After being interrogated by a Yugoslav People's Army colonel, Martinović reportedly admitted that his injuries had been self-inflicted in a botched attempt at masturbation. Public investigators reported that the prosecutor made a written conclusion from which it appears that the wounded performed an act of self-satisfaction in his field, that he put a beer bottle on a wooden stick and stuck it in the ground. After that, he sat on the bottle and enjoyed it. He was transferred to Belgrade for further investigations at the prestigious Military Medical Academy, but a medical team there reported that his injuries were not consistent with a self-inflicted wound. The team, which included 2 doctors from Belgrade and 1 from each from Ljubljana, Zagreb, and Skopje, thus representing 4 of Yugoslavia's 6 republics, concluded that the injuries had been caused by a strong, brutal, and sudden inertion or jamming of a 500 milliliter bottle, or rather its wider end, into the rectum, and that it was probably physically impossible for Martinović to have done this to himself. The team argued that the insertion could have only been carried out by at least 2 or more individuals. A second opinion was sought and provided a month later by the commission under Professor Dr. Janez Milaninski. The Milaninski team concluded that Martinović potentially could have used a stick to balance the bottle and inserted it this way, but broke and slipped into his rectum due to the force of body under his own weight. Yugoslav military and secret police officials, through this commission, concluded that this could have been self-inflicted. Martinović later recanted his confession, saying his family would have gotten better positions at their jobs or even gotten employed if they had made the confession. His son made this statement: "Friends are telling us that Albanian irredentists did this in revenge. They don't care who the victim might be, as long as it is a Serb." In other words, Martinović and his family strongly believed that this was a politically motivated attack. Once Serbian press reached the story about the Serbian bottle incident, waves of anti-Albanian and nationalist sentiment began to rise in Kosovo and elsewhere. The Serbian newspaper Politika asserted that the individuals who had allegedly attacked Martinović were members of a local Albanian family who wanted to purchase the land that Martinović refused to sell. The claim had considerable resonance in Serbian politics. The steady exodus of Serbs from Kosovo was seen as the result of deliberate persecution of Serbs by Albanians seeking to drive them off their land and seize their property. However, the Albanians in Kosovo took the view that, as indicated by Martinovic's early confession, had accidentally inflicted the wound on himself and tried to cover it up by blaming it on Albanians, enabling Serbian nationalists to exploit it to provoke anti-Albanian feelings. Others acknowledged that the evidence was unclear, but objected to the way that the case had been used to symbolize the Serbian-Albanian relationship. This Serbian bottle incident was, in itself, a significant development in Yugoslav politics. The Yugoslav government had for many years made open nationalism a taboo subject, and Yugoslav media outlets had previously systematically downplayed ethno-nationalism in the country. The collapse of this taboo and the coverage of the Martinović case heralded a growth of nationalism that was led to the country's collapse and dissolution in 1991. Milosevic emerged in 1987 as a force in Serbian politics after he declared support for Serbs in the Serbian autonomous province of Kosovo, who claimed they were being oppressed by the provincial government, which was dominated by Kosovo's majority ethnic group, ethnic Albanians. Milosevic claimed that ethnic Albanian authorities had abused their powers, that the autonomy of Kosovo was allowing the entrenchment of separatism in Kosovo, and that the rights of the Serbs in the province were being regularly violated. As a solution, he called for political change to reduce the autonomy, protect minority Serb rights, and initiate a strong crackdown on separatism in Kosovo. In 1988, using his influence in the Serbian League of Communists, Milosevic was able to succeed Ivan Stambolic in the anti-bureaucratic revolution and became the president of Socialist Republic of Serbia, and eventually the first president of Serbia. Milosevic, as well as his respective counterparts in Bosnia and Croatia, used their newly appointed powers to stoke nationalism in their countries, after the communists were voted out of power. Following the secession of Bosnia and Herzegovina on April 27, 1992, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia had de facto dissolved into 5 successor states following the nationalistic dissolution of Yugoslavia that occurred from 1988 all the way to 1992. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Slovenia, and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, later renamed Serbia and Montenegro after its attempts to claim the Yugoslav seat in the United Nations failed. Anyways guys, that will do it for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I of course read all your comments and I enjoy reading them, so like I said, like, comment, and subscribe, and click the notification bell to be the first person to watch these videos. Anyways guys, this is Frank from Fun with Flags and History, signing off, and have a wonderful day.
I'll let you hear me. Here we go.